Hi there. This is Rearview TV channel, where we talk about all sorts of things that we feel you should most definitely know in the life of today's world. Some information may leave you thinking and re-questioning whether what you have learned your whole life is true or not. All of us have grown up to trust and believe what we have been educated within the Western's education system for many years. However, on our channel we find the missing parts of our history that matters, history that is not being taught in the Western classrooms. Anyway, please note that our channel is just for information purposes only, and we always suggest you to do your own research. Please don't be a stranger, join our community. Like, share, and comment if you wish, but most of all subscribe to stay updated. Go ahead and click that notification bell. We start this video off with taking a step back in time, as we explore the history of a few countries that are no longer on the world map in today's date. What happened to them? Destroyed? Removed? Extinct? Let's dig a little further to find out. For many of us, history is something that we learn in books, or at school, or from our grandparents. But for some human beings, history is all they have left. Some, perhaps only a memory of the place they once called home. We start of our history video with looking at some of these extinct countries and see what they have to teach us. Let's start with exploring Ceylon. 1. Ceylon. Ceylon was a small island nation in the Indian Ocean. It was a British colony for over 150 years and gained independence in 1948. Ceylon was renamed Sri Lanka in 1972, which is its current name. Ceylon existed from 1948 to 1972, which is what's now called Sri Lanka. It gained independence from Britain in 1948 and was initially a parliamentary democracy, with a prime minister, Sirima Bandaranaike, and a monarch called Queen Elizabeth, as the head of state. In 1972, the country was renamed Sri Lanka and became a republic with a president as the head of state. During its existence, Ceylon experienced significant economic growth and development, largely due to its production of tea, rubber, and coconut. Despite this progress, the country faced challenges such as political instability and ethnic tensions between its Sinhalese and Tamil populations. 2. Rhodesia. Rhodesia was a British colony in southern Africa that existed from 1923 to 1979. It was named after the British businessman and empire builder Cecil Rhodes, who was the driving force behind the colonization of the region in the late 19th century. In the late 1800s, Cecil Rhodes secured a royal charter from the British government to establish the British South Africa Company, which was given control over a large swath of southern Africa, including modern-day Zimbabwe and Zambia. Cecil Rhodes' aim was to establish a British-run federation in the region, and he began sending settlers to the area. In 1923, Cecil Rhodesia was officially declared a British colony, and its first capital was Salisbury, now Harare. Over the next several decades, Rhodesia became a prosperous and largely self-governing colony, with a strong economy based on agriculture and mining. However, the racial policies of the Rhodesian government were increasingly at odds with the values of the British government and the wider world. The white minority government imposed a system of racial segregation and denied political rights to the majority African descent population. This led to increasing tensions and, eventually, a guerrilla war for independence. In 1979, after years of conflict, Rhodesia transitioned to majority rule and became known as Zimbabwe. The new government, led by Robert Mugabe, faced many challenges in its early years, including a struggling economy and ongoing political tensions, but Zimbabwe has since become a sovereign nation with a complex history and a diverse population. Rhodesia was a British colony that was marked by both prosperity and racial conflict, and its legacy continues to shape the politics and society of southern Africa today. It declared independence from Britain in 1965 and became a republic. In 1979, Rhodesia was renamed Zimbabwe after a long and bloody civil war. 3. Czechoslovakia. Czechoslovakia was a country in Central Europe that was created after World War I. Czechoslovakia was a country that existed from 1918 to 1993. It was created after World War I as a part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire was dissolved. The country was made up of two main ethnic groups, Czechs and Slovaks, and it was a democratic republic with a parliamentary system. During World War II, Czechoslovakia was occupied by Nazi Germany, and after the war, it became a communist state as part of the Soviet-controlled Eastern Bloc. In the 1920s and 1930s, Czechoslovakia became one of the most democratic and prosperous countries in Europe. It had a strong economy, an excellent education system, and a thriving cultural scene. However, the country was soon threatened by Nazi Germany's expansion in the late 1930s, and in 1938, German forces occupied the country. During the 1950s and 1960s, there were several protests and uprisings against the communist government, but they were all suppressed. In 1968, the communist government was overthrown in a peaceful revolution known as the Prague Spring. However, Soviet tanks entered the country and reinstalled the communist government. During World War II, the Czech resistance fought against the German occupation, and after the war, Czechoslovakia became a communist state under Soviet influence. This lasted until 1989, when the Velvet Revolution took place and the communist government was overthrown. The country then transitioned to a multi-party democracy, but this period of freedom was short-lived. In 1989, the Velvet Revolution took place, and the country became a democratic republic again. In 1993, Czechoslovakia peacefully split into two separate countries, the Czech Republic and Slovakia. Since then, both countries have become members of NATO and the European Union. In 1993, Czechoslovakia split into two separate countries, the Czech Republic and Slovakia. This division was largely peaceful and was motivated by cultural and political differences between the two groups. Today, the Czech Republic and Slovakia are both prosperous and democratic countries, with strong economies and growing industries. They remain proud of their shared history as Czechoslovakia and are proud of the role they played in Europe's cultural and political landscape. 4. USSR. The Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, or USSR, was a federal socialist state in Eastern Europe and Northern Asia. The USSR was dissolved in 1991 and split into 15 different countries, including Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus. The Soviet Union, officially the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, USSR, was a transcontinental country that spanned much of Eurasia from 1922 to 1991. A flagship communist state, it was nominally a federal union of 15 national republics. In practice, both its government and its economy were highly centralized until its final years. It was a one-party state governed by the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, with the city of Moscow serving as its capital as well as that of its largest and most populous republic, the Russian SFSR. Other major cities included Leningrad, Russian SFSR, Kiev, Ukrainian SSR, Minsk, Belarusian SSR, Tashkent, Uzbek SSR, Almaty, Kazakh SSR, and Novosibirsk, Russian SFSR. It was the largest country in the world, covering over 22,402,200 square kilometers, 8,649,500 square miles, and spanning 11 time zones. The Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, USSR, was a federal socialist state in Eastern Europe and Northern Asia that existed from 1922 to 1991. It was comprised of 15 republics, including Russia, and was one of the largest and most powerful states in the world. The USSR was established in the aftermath of the Russian Revolution of 1917, which overthrew the monarchy and resulted in the establishment of the first communist state. It was ruled by the Communist Party, led by Joseph Stalin from the late 1920s until his death in 1953. Stalin's regime was characterized by totalitarian rule, widespread purges, and the brutal suppression of dissent. Under Stalin, the USSR underwent rapid industrialization and the collectivization of agriculture, which led to significant economic growth but also widespread famine and human suffering. During World War II, the USSR played a major role in defeating Nazi Germany and emerged as one of the world's two superpowers, along with the United States. The post-Stalin era was marked by a period of de-Stalinization and a series of reforms under Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev. However, these reforms were reversed under Khrushchev's successor, Leonid Brezhnev, who established a period of relative stability and conservatism. The USSR continued to play a major role in global affairs until the late 1980s, when its economy began to stagnate and widespread discontent emerged. In 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed as a result of a failed coup attempt by communist hardliners, and the 15 republics declared their independence. The collapse of the USSR marked the end of the Cold War and the beginning of a new era in world history. The war crimes and crimes against humanity which were perpetrated by the Soviet Union and its armed forces from 1919 to 1991 include acts which were committed by the Red Army, later called the Soviet Army, as well as acts which were committed by the NKVD, including acts which were committed by the NKVD's internal troops. In some cases, these acts were committed upon the orders of the Soviet leader Joseph Stalin in pursuance of the early Soviet government's policy of Red Terror. In other instances they were committed without orders by Soviet troops against prisoners of war or civilians of countries that had been in armed conflict with the USSR, or they were committed during partisan warfare. There were also reports that Soviet soldiers often engaged in plunder, rape and other crimes against the Poles, causing the population to fear and hate the regime. Finnish children were killed by Soviet partisans at Sietujärvi in Finnish Lapland 1942. Furthermore, people would be deported to other countries, and during the transportation, which was very old freight trains, a lot of people would not make it to the end of their journey and die, sadly. People were fleeing before the advancing Red Army. Large numbers of the inhabitants of the German provinces of East Prussia, Silesia, and Pomerania died during the evacuations, some from cold and starvation, some during combat operations. A significant percentage of this death toll, however, occurred when evacuation columns encountered units of the Red Army. Civilians were run over by tanks, shot, or otherwise murdered. Women and young girls were raped and left to die. There's a lot of negative and bad information I've found on the Soviet Union, and it's too much to add in this video. That may be a video for another day. These vanished countries serve as a reminder of how much their world can change in just a few decades. They also teach us that every nation has its own unique story, and that history should never be forgotten. Thank you for joining us on this journey through time. We hope you liked our video. If you did, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Thank you. And goodbye.